walk like lions. Hey, good morning. Welcome. Chappy coming to you live from Prescott, Arizona on this Wednesday. And you know what Wednesday means. We've got a patriotic theme, a historical theme, and we're going to bring you some good stuff here, folks. Folks, today, we're going to the Battle of the Bulge. All right, and it is December. The Battle of the Bulge did take place in December. So let's get ready here. We are talking about Lanzerath Ridge, the Battle of Lanzerath Ridge, and a particular lieutenant that was involved here, 20-year-old Lyle Buck was his name. And this was on the northern shoulder of the Battle of the Bulge. And to kind of give you some groundwork here for what was going on, there were 4 divisions, American divisions, placed in the Ardennes Forest. And this was a kind of a slow area of the front line. So they put a lot of units that were either had gone through some heavy fights to get some rest, or some very brand new units to get a little bit of experience in their first time combat. So they had put, like, for example, the 99th Infantry Division, which is the division we're going to be talking about today, was placed on the northern shoulder. The 106th, which had just been through a pretty big fight. I believe you had the 28th Infantry in line there, and then one other, and I'm forgetting right now what that one was. But basically they held this 60 some odd mile line in the Ardennes Forest, and it was supposed to be quiet. This is where the Germans decided to put their counterattack into play, and it was known as the Ardennes counteroffensive. And on this particular day of the 16th of December, all along the front, from about 5:30 until 7 o'clock in the morning, there was just a constant artillery barrage. Now, let's get kind of even closer to where this battle's taken place. The little town of Lanzerath, and up behind it was a ridge that overlooked a critical junction, actually road junction, for the entire region there. And the Germans knew that they had to go seize the road junction and go through it to be able to get all their tanks through and into the Ardennes Forest. Again, you kind of wonder what they were thinking, but if they could punch through, believe it or not, they did have a pretty good measure of success of actually getting up to the English Channel and cutting the American forces and the Allied forces in half. So that's why this is a critical road junction here. Now, here's the players. Lyle Buck in this town, he was with the Intelligence and Reconnaissance Platoon, 394th Infantry Regiment, 99th Infantry Division. Okay, it's the IR platoon was just a fancy way of saying scouts, folks. This is cavalry stuff here, folks. So here you have this platoon. Lieutenant Buck had 18 men, and then he had 4 field artillery observers with him on that particular day. They had the 820th tank destroyer platoon was there, so they had actually originally had some tank destroyers on site. But when the artillery barrage started in that morning, that was pulled out to go strengthen another area. They didn't realize that that a German force would be coming through this town. It was a quiet little town. If you go there now, it literally is still one little road with houses on both sides. Probably about 20 houses altogether, a church. That was it, folks. So here, Lieutenant Buck is up on top of this ridge overlooking the town. And after the barrage hit, he sent some guys down into the town. The Jeep took off, it went down, and they was supposed to go through the town and check out a little further down the road. And they had been making patrols into all these areas, so they were kind of familiar with the area. In fact, they had been going behind enemy lines sometimes and capturing German soldiers and bringing them back for interrogation. So they knew the lay of the land, basically. So as this Jeep goes through the town and leaves, it's gone for about maybe 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden, it comes racing back in at full speed. And Lieutenant Buck's like, oh, something's odd here. And sure enough, they started putting, getting their binoculars out and scope. And the Jeep gets back up and basically says, we've got a lot of Germans coming. Now, what's coming against this little platoon on the hill? On the ridge, I should say. We have the 1st SS Panzer Division, the 3rd Battalion, folks. With it, 550 elite German soldiers. Now remember, elite can be used loosely when it comes to enemy forces against us. So these 550 soldiers, and they're coming down the road kind of, they didn't expect resistance. So they kind of think, well, we're just going to march into this town. And sure enough, they started coming into the town, and they started spreading out a little bit. They were doing some tactical stuff. They were getting some people out into the fields and around the village there. And the lieutenant looks down and he sees what appears to be a commanding officer, and because he's in a fancy Jeep. All right, he's in a fancy, German equivalent of a Jeep. It comes pulling into town, and there's this little girl out playing. And as Lieutenant Buck's watching this, he watches the German officer walk up to the girl. They're talking, and then she points her finger up, and what he assumed was pointing at their position. And all he knew is he yelled to his guys, get ready, here they come. And sure enough, the German commander started to deploy his basic elements, his companies, into attack formation, and they begin advancing towards the hill. And now on the hill, from the town to the hill, there was probably there's a field. I've actually stood on that ridge. On that ridge, you look down, and halfway through the field, it's about 400 meters long, and there's a fence. There's a barbed wire fence. It wasn't there for defensive purposes. It was just there for agricultural and ranching purposes. So just a natural defense there. So these men start to cross the field. These German soldiers, these SS soldiers, and start to go up the hill. And Lyle Buck had radioed back when all this started happening. Hey, we need some artillery. They said, hey, there's no artillery coming. We are focused on other missions here. All you got to do is hold that ridge at all costs. And all Lieutenant Buck could do is, salute and execute. So his 18 men on top of that hill and his 4 artillery observers begin to defend the hill. And the first wave comes up, and they open up. Now they had some pretty fortified foxholes and stuff. They had, I believe, 150 cal. They open up, and as the Germans are coming through the field, as they're approaching, as they're trying to get over the fence in the middle, the Americans are just mowing them down, folks. Just obliterating these guys. They pull back. They understand that, hey, this could be a very large force on top of this hill. They don't realize there's only 18 guys plus 4 forward observers. And this goes on. Several waves are thrown against the ridge here. And the battle itself, this battle for this ridge, takes place through the entire day, from dawn to dusk. We're talking 10 hours of fighting. The Germans tried every different approach, like different flanking movements and everything, to get up to this ridge. And several times they got close, but every time the Americans are fighting back, firing back, and again, just taking out Germans left and right. Finally, as the sun's getting ready to go down on that December day, they ran out of ammo. They literally run out of ammunition, and they're still not ready to surrender. They didn't surrender on purpose. As Lyle Buck put it, he was literally pulled out of his foxhole by a bunch of Germans, and a German officer was there with a pistol, and he thought he was just going to get shot. But they were all taken captive is what it comes down to. The results of this day, now the Germans reported that they only lost 92 guys. But according to the actual soldiers on the hill and their eyewitness accounts, there were hundreds. They estimate there was about 300 dead Germans in the field. So here this one platoon, this one American infantry platoon, holds off against an entire SS Panzer battalion, folks. Just decimates them. They're later brought down. The men are brought down. Did I mention that only one American was killed? Now 14 were wounded. They were brought down into the village there and pretty much taken into as POWs. The funny thing is Lyle Buck is in the little gas house there, and the German commander wasn't mad at him. The German commander was like, you guys did an awesome job defending that hill. We have got to give you credit. You only had 18 guys. We had an entire battalion. The other thing is Lyle Buck, that was his birthday. He had just turned, as it went past midnight that night on the 17th, he had just turned 21 years old. And the German commander looked at him and said, "Yep, today you truly have become a man." And it was a pretty cool story there. I was actually there kind of as on a battlefield walk. I learned it, and then I took some soldiers back later. A few months later to that site so the soldiers could learn what happened on that ridgeline there. The second time we went there with soldiers, there were a bunch of old guys up there looking at the foxholes and stuff. They were the actual guys who had fought there. And I'm like, well, why are you here? You fought there. And he said, well, we kind of like to come back and see what happened, big picture. Because remember, they're just there on that ridge. That's all they know. They don't know what's happening to their right, to their left. So it was really cool to meet these guys in person and actually kind of get their stories. And they even said themselves, yeah, the field was full of just dead Germans. It was not simply just 92 of them. There were hundreds upon hundreds of these guys that had been killed by this platoon, these 18 guys. Quite an incredible battle, folks. Now, what did it do? Well, they didn't hold the ridge. It delayed the entire advance of the rest of the German army behind them by 10 hours. And those critical hours allowed all the supply depots to the rear to be reinforced. And the entire northern shoulder offensive for the Germans collapsed. They did make some ground, but they could never gain the momentum they would have had if they would have just gone right through. You see what I'm saying, folks? So this delay was critical in pretty much stopping the Germans in the northern shoulder, slowing them down for sure. Plus, it showed the Germans, in elite units of the Germans, that even some of our just average infantry units, in this case, a very new infantry unit, we're a force to be reckoned with. We would stand our ground. We would defend at all costs what we had to defend. So that was another thing that went out. Folks, if you ever get a chance to get over there, go visit the Ardennes Forest. You still find foxholes there. You still find these sites. You can probably still find ammunition there from World War II. It's an awesome sight to see. You really grasp when you're standing on the ground looking at these places, the intensity of the fights, and just how beautiful it was for these guys to be there and defending these sites. It encouraged me, is what it did. It encouraged all the soldiers that went. They left there with resolve that, hey, I know if I was called upon to do the same thing, that I would hunker down and complete the mission. So, folks, the Battle of Lanzerath Ridge. All right. Now, we always talk some spiritual things here, right, folks? And I wanted to focus on today, again, and I've been saying this a few times last week and this week and probably even before that, the importance of holding our ground at all costs in our spiritual lives, holding on to our faith when things come against us and make us doubt, when things come against us and make us want to compromise. A lot of Christians, believe it or not, give in. And we're seeing a lot of the progressive churches in America just give in. Just give up. Say, okay, well, we'll just wait everything out. Or, we'll let all these people have their special sins because, God's a loving God and it's okay to sin. So you see these type of things. Well, you see these people, what they're giving up is their faith. What they're losing ground. They're giving up the ground. And that's not a good thing, folks. We have to stand our ground as Christians. We have to stand in our faith as Christians. And I've told you this again and again. A pretty cool verse that I brought out today. 1 Corinthians 15:58. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Wow. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Those guys were told to hold the ridge at all costs, and they did it until they ran out of ammunition and were finally pulled physically out of their foxholes. What I'm saying today is, as Christians, we need to hold the ridges in our lives. We need to hold these key pieces of ground that the enemy is trying to take from us, these key principles that the enemy is trying to water down and take from us. We're the ones who stand in the gap for other people. We're the ones that hold fast to the faith. And we look around us and see people are just hurting everywhere because faith in the past has been compromised. We have people literally being told, well, you know, in a chaos situation like's going on in the U.S. today, faith is not really important. Folks, what a lie. What a lie. And it's going to take a few of us, and hopefully all of us Christians, to say no. Wrong answer. Faith is first and foremost. It's the most important thing. And then comes the ways of the world. See where I'm going, folks? All right. I want to encourage you today. You're all doing great out there. Hello to everybody out there watching. It is so good to see you. And if this has touched your life, or you know it can touch someone else's life, share it. Get this word out. Get these things out to people so that they can be encouraged. And it's pretty cool history, folks. Let's just face it. I mean, that's some good stuff there. I mean, you don't hear about Lanzerath Ridge in your average history books, but it's a battle that actually happened, and it was a critical battle. I mean, sure, you hear about D-Day, Pearl Harbor, all these big things, but when you start to get into these little bitty battles where soldiers just showed themselves, you know, just phenomenal courage and boldness and just valor on the battlefield, we need to look at that stuff. Because as it comes down to it, it's the everyday soldier. It's the everyday Christian that makes a difference out there. It's not the bishops, the popes, the megachurch pastors that make a difference. It's the average people on the line that make the difference in this world. All right, folks, be good out there. Walk like lions.